The following is a special presentation of the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Welcome to Tough Enough, a recap and breakdown show from the MMA Outsiders, following every episode of The Ultimate Fighter Season 32. Team Grasso versus Team Shevchenko, presented by Playback. And now, here are your hosts, Tom Albano and Zain Bando.
And here we are for another edition of Tough Enough. That's Zain Bando on Tom Albano. Welcome once again, guys, to episode number 4 of Tough Enough. The Ultimate Fighter, Team Grasso versus Team Shevchenko aftermath. Zain, quite the fight that we just had. And maybe not an exciting first round, but that finish had to be one of the more unbelievable finishes that we've seen, at least in the modern TUF history.
Yeah, in modern TUF history for sure, especially considering, I guess you could say, the lucrative TUF history of when they brought back the show in the ESPN Plus era as one of the most exciting finishes of the last several seasons. Before we get into the actual fight in the episode itself, we wanted to remind you that Tough Enough, the Ultimate Fighter, Season 32, Team Grasso versus Team Shevchenko aftermath is being live streamed everywhere across all of the Empty the Bench podcast network platforms, including our flagship show, the MMA Outsiders, as this is a part of that. So please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Empty the Bench podcast network, because we are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers. You can check out all of our content. This show, the MMA Outsiders, my show, Bando's Breakdowns, which airs at 3 Eastern, noon Pacific, and Wednesdays every single week. You check that show out. You can check out the flagship ETB show and so much more at youtube.com/ETB Network. You can also listen to the MMA Outsiders, which again, this is a part of anywhere where you get your podcast. And of course, there's the little perk that we like to disclose every single week, that if you have YouTube Premium, you can technically get the audio-only version there as well. But this is being live streamed everywhere. It's right after the episode we just got done with it, and I'm excited to jump right into it, because it was definitely a very interesting episode, and it definitely was one that could very well be served as the cornerstone for the episodes that are to come, because it looks like the competition is really ramping up. So I'm excited to go through this with you tonight.
Well, we are officially, Dana mentioned at the end of the episode, we are officially halfway through the quarterfinals now. We got 4 more fighters to move on to the semifinals to determine. Don't forget to go to etbpodcast.com as well for more information from the network and blogs upon blogs from Zain and his contributors. Again, to my right is Zain Bando, staff writer for bjpen.com, MMA Knockout, and for the sporting news, I'm Tom Albano. I work over at MMA News, Fansided MMA, and with the PFL. Just had a massive weekend with the PFL in Salt Lake City and Bellator over in Dublin, and now we got the PFL coming up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
You sure did, and it looks like, Tom, even though we're kind of diverting for just a second, I think the PFL needs to do some rebranding, because there were knockouts on knockouts among plenty, which is something the leader, if you will, has not distributed. So very, 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 very interesting. So it seems like the co-leader, if you will, could very well be the home of the knockout. Speaking of
Zain, if you're listening to, obviously you were absent this week for reasons, but I was doing the most recent episode of the MMA Outsiders, which went out tonight with Pat Dana, Anthony Ballister, and Brett Cagle. I pretty much was of the opinion that Bellator was pretty much the card of the weekend, with all the excitement in the finishes that were happening on that card.
I mean, I would have to respectfully disagree with you, but since you were locked in on Bellator, I could understand why you had that opinion. I thought UFC Saudi Arabia was pretty good too, and I actually thought the end of the PFL main card, especially with the impa finish over Jakob Neto, was very, very entertaining. So overall, a very good weekend for MMA, no matter how you slice it or dice it, if you will. So
for sure. And then, of course, before we get into anything, Tough Enough, the Ultimate Fighter, Team Grasso versus Team Shevchenko aftermath, and everything else here at the Empty the Bench Network. is presented by Playback. Watching sports is more fun with others, but we spend too much of our time watching alone. Playback is a virtual space where communities can stream live sports together, with everyone perfectly synced up. Creators can hop on stage, deliver their own play-by-play analysis and commentary, and invite viewers up for Q&A. Playback makes watching sports fully interactive and a social experience. From playing fantasy sports, repping your favorite players and teams, and watching with the commentators and communities you care about. Win or lose, sports are best enjoyed together. Join our community by going to playback.tv/ETB Network to find out more, including our live stream schedule. All right, Zain, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the show. Obviously, middleweight was supposed to be the highlight here, even though we are coming off of a featherweight fight. We are coming off of a featherweight week, but they had a lot of talking about Robert Valentin, who Robert Valentin and Giannis were the two guys who had to step in a couple of weeks ago on episode 2 when Omran and Shandakan couldn't fight. We'll get to their fight in just a little bit. But Robert Valentin produces one of the quickest and most brutal and fastest knockouts in the modern TUF history, and that has earned him quite a bit of reward. Alexa Grasso has actually basically named him to the coaching staff, and he is going to get his teammates ready for these fights. Alexa putting a lot of responsibility on Robert, and Dana White during the talk about, the lead up with the show, a lot of talk about Robert, a lot of hype around him. So for everything that, happened in last week's fight, that happened with last week's fight at featherweight, and what's going to happen with this week with Omran and Shandakan, Robert Valentin has a, he has a spotlight from this week.
Yeah, he has a spotlight from this week for sure, and it's going to be interesting to see, if Grasso's team keeps winning. We're going to get into in a little bit whether or not Team Grasso was able to make it 3 out of 4 wins to begin the season. But, if you have someone who's sort of, playing the assistant coach role while he's waiting for, his semifinal bout to transpire in a couple of weeks, it doesn't hurt to have someone that kind of knows the other cast members, both on his team and on Team Shevchenko. And it's interesting to see how, in Ultimate Fighter history, we've really never seen, a fighter from either team, no matter what season it was, really take the initiative and say, hey, I want to help my guys be successful. So you have to give him all the credit in the world for doing so. And even if he doesn't win the season, which is still very possible, we still have 8 weeks left to go, or however many weeks we have left. It still tells me that he seems like a likable guy, and he has a fighting style to where if he got signed, I think he would do okay. And learning from someone like the UFC flyweight champion of the world doesn't hurt either, especially considering that he's kind of following everything that she's teaching him, and it's really good to see from his point of view.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, because you mentioned getting signed. I feel like I don't know why, because obviously the show TUF is pre-taped and then it airs, when it airs in the Tuesday night slots that it airs. I don't know why they wouldn't be doing all of this, hype around Robert and talking about Robert, especially on a show where he really isn't expected to be the focal point unless Dana sees something in him, and the knockout was so impressive that he's probably going to get a contract even if he doesn't win the season.
Yeah, just to give you some context, they normally pre-tape it in the late fall, early winter, and sometimes mid-winter in the early winter months. So just to give you a little bit of insight there.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know why they would make a decision like that to have, a spotlight on him if he's not going to get a contract. I feel like he's going to be utilized at some point in the future, even if he doesn't win.
Yeah, I would say so too. And it probably tells the viewer, which is you, me, and the thousands of other people that are watching the show, to stay tuned for future episodes, because as you just alluded to, he could be a talking point, and if he keeps winning, and if he even makes it to the finale, then you know why they're starting to paint the picture as to what the semifinal and final matchup could look like. Because if we keep watching and we notice that Valentin is a star, or Valentine, is a star, then we kind of can put 2 and 2 together even before the final episode as to what the finale could look like. So you just brought up a very, very good point. And as Joey Diaz and many years ago in a Joe Rogan Experience podcast, they're planting the seed. So you never you never know.
You never know. All right, let's talk about the two fighters. Let's talk about the two fighters who are going to be competing tonight. So number one, we have Omran Shaban from Team Grasso. He was the individual who unfortunately had the cold sore on his mouth, which caused the delay in this fight. Again, I still can't believe 2 TUF seasons in a row now, a cold sore delays a fight. And a hype fight at that.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, but I think we're going to get to how the fight went in a second. I guess I could say with how the fight ended, the week-long delay was worth the wait, and definitely his story. And I'm not taking anything away from his opponent, Magomedov, Shamakhan, but I will say though that his story, him being from Finland and him moving to Dublin, Ireland, and him literally living in the gym with his boxing coach was very, 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 very inspiring to say the least. And it's clear and obvious that I guess I'm just going to reveal it now. It's clear and obvious that even after his dad's death, that he knew what he wanted to do from a very young age. And it's cool that he's living out his dream at a very similar age to me. He's 23 years old and I'm 24. So for him to be fighting on a pretty big stage on The Ultimate Fighter, where it's, being aired on ESPN and UFC Fight Pass and tons of other affiliates that I don't even know about, is a very, very interesting thing. And it's just cool to see that he has as much confidence in himself as his coaches do. So before we get to Magomedov, I just wanted to point out that I thought that Amran's backstory was the most interesting out of the two. What did you think?
Yeah, for sure. You talk about his father's death. You talk about the conditions that he had to go through and living in the gym. It's all kind of a very humbling kind of experience. And you see that humility in him, even as he's getting to this bigger stage. And I mean, he's got an impressive background coming into this season with a 6-1. Yeah, with a 6-1 record. Yeah, 6-1 record. I know, I want to double check that. He actually won the UAE Warriors welterweight title in January before getting signed to compete on this season.
Yeah, which is another very interesting feather in the cap too. UAE Warriors, for those of you who don't know about it, it's a Abu Dhabi based regional promotion, if you will. Their shows there on Fight Pass, and actually one of the fighters who used to compete there, Renat Fakhretdinov, who now fights in the UFC, and has had an interesting performance this past weekend. He's also out of UAE Warriors, so it's cool to see that the UAE Warriors pipeline is still going into the UFC.
Well, that wasn't the only promotion that Shaban fought in. He's also fought in Cage Warriors, another promotion that's proven to be a feeder to the UFC with really good talent.
Right.
So he's got quite the impressive background, and that's not to dispute Shamakhan Magomedov's background at all. It's just that Omran really stood out.
Right. So for those of you who don't know, Shamakhan Magomedov is from Dagestan. He's pretty much coached by Khabib's old coaching protege, if you will. He made a mention of that, and he pretty much finished up his camp in New Jersey, and he definitely was someone that I thought took his career very seriously. It seems like he has a good support system around him. He cares a ton about his faith. He knows that he has a chance to carry on a legacy like Islam and Khabib, and he doesn't want to let either of those guys down. And I thought his backstory was interesting, despite it maybe being a little bit shorter. But I thought that he was also someone just to note as well, and someone that I don't think a lot of people, myself included, really knew about before the season even began. Obviously, he's fighting overseas in Russia, and he's fighting in promotions that aren't necessarily accessible from a streaming standpoint. So it was good to know that another Dagestani prospect, if you will, is on the radar of the UFC, and it's good to know that also into the New Jersey pipeline is still going strong, considering we've had a ton of fighters come out of that city, as you very well, being from that general area. So I thought
Yeah.
his story was awesome as well.
It was fun to see somebody from New Jersey. Obviously, I'm from the other new state in that area.
Right.
It was fun to see somebody, a little local competing there. Obviously, as you mentioned, from Dagestan, but training out of Jersey. Backgrounds that maybe you didn't get to see, don't get a lot of exposure to him. He did compete in LFA recently, though. So you had like Omran won the LFA. I mean the UAE Warriors welterweight title. Shandakan came into this fight a few months after winning the interim LFA welterweight title. He won it in February and then got signed to compete on the show.
Yeah, and just a small nugget, and I'm sure you might laugh at me for saying this, but don't you think it's kind of strange that you get signed to the Ultimate Fighter after winning a interim belt and not a lineal belt? I don't know. It just to me, like, I don't mean to steal this, but it's almost like you got to finish the story, and he didn't he didn't finish the LFA story, which I thought was unique in its own right. But hey, UFC Fight Pass is doing what it needs to do. It's promoting young stars. The LFA is one of the best regional promotions that they have. So hats off to him for graduating from that and being an LFA alumni, so to speak. But winning an interim title and getting signed to the Ultimate Fighter, to me, was just a little bit unusual, so to speak.
Well, first of all, like you mentioned, this is LFA. I mean, this is UFC Fight Pass promoting the young prospects that should get promoted. And, he was in a main event of an LFA. It was, let me double check my notes, 177. So, he did what he has done. And that relates to, second of all, he's built up quite an impressive resume for himself. He was one of the middleweight standouts. He was somebody in my top 3 that I had for middleweight. And third of all, in relation to that phrase that you use, is there adrenaline in your soul right now, Zain?
Is there adrenaline in my soul? What do you mean?
Because you said finish the story.
If
you ever hear his theme song, Cody Rhodes' theme song, that's how it starts.
Yes, and with you just alluding to that, then yeah, I can say with confidence that there currently is adrenaline in my stomach right now. Yes.
All right, moving off of the back, we'll get to the fight in a second, but I think there's something else to talk about, and that's what exactly happened in this show.
See, hang on, I don't mean to interrupt, but what we're about to talk about is the 2-team experiences. Like, okay, first off, shout out to whoever decided that this would be a good idea, because where was this in previous seasons since the show returned? You had a glorious opportunity to do it with McGregor and Chandler. You didn't do it. They did it
a little bit.
They did a little bit, but you would think that what we're about to talk about is something that those guys would have totally done.
See, I thought you were going to go in direction of how we talked about how last week's show was very quiet. And it's like segments like this help to make the show, really good. You're seeing things like this.
Yeah, and it also kind of brings you back to the older years of the Ultimate Fighter where this was a thing on the regular, like every 2 weeks. They would do something remotely close to this that was quote unquote fun. So
I mean, obviously, if we're talking about the older TUF season, the madness and drunken madness that happens in the house is give or take. It's either something you like or something you dislike. But it's like kind of like what we were talking about last week, Zain. It's sometimes it's okay to be formulaic, but that was one of the problems in the seasons before TUF, took the little hiatus before it came back, was that it had become too formulaic. It was, okay, intro, fighter background 1, fighter background 2, some training in between. If there's something that happens, then it happens, weigh in, fight. Like, it was same old every week. Things like this really spice things up. And I really liked this idea. And I think the fighters even talked about it, that this can be a little motivating, showing the perks that you get with being that you can have with being a UFC fighter and a successful UFC fighter at that.
1,000%. That's definitely good to know. Number one and number two, because you just mentioned it. I didn't know that Valentina Shevchenko was such a huge fan of Las Vegas that she always goes to Circa after every single win in a title fight that she had. So it was cool to see from her team's perspective that they were able to get a taste of what Valentina likes to do. And then Alexa Grasso's experience was a little bit more business-like, to where it's like, okay, we're going to go to the Performance Institute. We're going to get treatment. We're going to take a break from the gym. And it's clear that in some regard, kind of Grasso knew what some of those fighters were going through, and he was also able to help them out with their aches and pains. So overall, two very unique perspectives, but they were both able to use their breaks, if you will, in the way that they felt would best benefit their team. And you have to respect that, because this show is, long grind. You only get, from what I can recall, they've changed the policy in seasons past, but you only get a handful of times to speak to your family. It used to it used to be not at all, and then it used to be once, and now it's twice, I'm pretty sure. So it's good to see that they got at least a little bit of the outside world. Maybe they really didn't have their phones with them or anything like that.
I think the semifinal fighters, the ones who win their quarterfinal, get to talk to their family before the semifinal fight,
right?
And then
right,
I think before the finals.
Right. So I'm just saying the evolution of the show has now come with things like this, where you get these perks, and you also get, the chance to, be reintroduced to the outside world after being in a house for so many weeks and seeing the same people over and over and over again. So
yeah, it's kind of Big Brother like. That's the way you were explaining it. Kind of makes me think of Big Brother, how they go into this house and they're basically isolated from the outside world until a certain point.
For sure.
One thing that I did like about this segment, though, wasn't just that, hey, it's something different for the fighters and it's something different for the viewers, but they also use this time to build up the Grasso-Shevchenko rivalry, because Alexa Grasso was talking to a couple of her fighters, and Grasso had mentioned, one of the fighters had brought up the idea of, how Shevchenko pretty much thinks the win over her was a fluke, and that she was kind of robbed in that second fight that went to a draw in last year's Noche UFC.
Mm-hmm.
And Alexa mentions, she looks up to Valentina, always did, and the fact that Shevchenko considers everything about, I want to say everything about her, but the win and the title reign, basically all this fluke. And Grasso mentions how it just motivates her more to get that solidified third win when they face off for a third time, to prove, hey, I'm not a fluke. Because Grasso even mentioned, and we've talked about it, and other shows, Zain have talked about it, some people still feel like Shevchenko is still the number one flyweight fighter, female flyweight. Let me try that again. Female flyweight fighter in the world. The alliteration there.
I still, okay. So just to piggyback off that, I still think that that's the case too, which is why they need to do this trilogy, number one. And number two, I think for Shevchenko to consider Grasso's reign, as she used the word, what Grasso is currently going through right now is not a reign. She won the title, and then there was a draw. Reign is not the right word to use, considering that Grasso is yet to defend the championship. At the time that we're recording this, and she may not even get a chance to defend her title until the fall. So I think Shevchenko's comments are a little bit harsh. Is she still the number one flyweight in the world? In my opinion, yes. But to go that far and to call her opponent's win a fluke, when it's clear that Shevchenko got caught and she got too comfortable in a fight that she was winning, I think it's a little bit off base, and I think it's something that it should motivate us a lot more to go out and really prove that there is no fluke this time around. And this isn't to discount anything that Shevchenko's done at 125. She's in a wonderful career, but to go at her newly minted rival, if you will, over a fight where she clearly got caught, I think is a little bit too much. What do you think?
I feel like, I mean, Valentina has admitted herself that basically she got caught, and some people feel like she had an off night. And I mean, I'm not discrediting anything. Because I'm in the boat as you. I still think Shevchenko, if we were to do a pound for pound with women's flyweight, is number one.
And do
But
you still and do you agree with me in a sense that when she uses the word reign is not the right word to use?
Because if we're talking the literal definition of the word, and maybe this is just me being my English self, if we're talking about the literal definition of the word, it's not referring to the that she's had a reign of dominance. It's just referring to that the title reign is Grasso's.
Right, and as I was trying to allude to, I don't think reign is the right word, considering she's yet to defend the title once. Because I'm always of the belief that you're not the champion until you and you're not the true champion of the division until you defend it once, and that's the way I'll probably think about titles until I'm done following the sport. But that's just me though.
All right, but I mean, it's definitely making the fight more interesting. Let me put it that. It's definitely making the fight more interesting, especially if it does end up main eventing at the Sphere at 306. We still technically have no confirmation of any sort of card, I think, for other than all the hype that Dana is trying to put around the Sphere.
Right. I don't think we've any formal announcements, but he said at the post-fight press conference in Saudi that he would announce more during International Fight Week. So that remains to be seen. It's kind of like the timing could not be any better. But now, are you ready to move on to the fight itself?
Yes. So, usual 5-second pause for you to get the hell out of here if you haven't seen the fight.
Which you should, by the way.
Yes, which you should. We should recommend. All right. Well, so much for me saying that Shanda Khan was in my top 3 of the middleweights to watch out for, because I mean, he looked good in the first round, with complete grappling control. But then, my God, I mean, this is one of, like I said at the start of the show, this is one of the best comebacks in TUF history. I mean, this was unbelievable.
Oh, without a doubt. This is a throwback to 12 years ago when every TUF fight was amazing. And see, this is if you're an OG TUF fan, like we both are, I started with season 3, you started with season 1. These are the kind of fights that would happen on the regular every single week that would make you obsessively tune into every episode because you wouldn't know what was going to happen. And now you're noticing more of these one-sided fights. This was anything but a one-sided fight. And as you just alluded to, one of the best comebacks in recent TUF history, and a fight that, as I was watching the previews, and I'm sure you felt the same way too, that I was genuinely super excited to see what was going to happen. And even though the first round didn't deliver as we thought it was going to, the second round was just pure, absolute chaos. Where 30 seconds one way, 30 seconds the other way, either guy has the advantage. Yeah. And then of course Shaban was able to do his thing and get the comeback submission, but still a crazy fight.
Well, that's absolutely the thing. Nuts. Well, that's the thing. You were expecting that. I mean, the first round, we both agreed, did not deliver. It was kind of boring, but it was a clear Shanda Khan round. I mean,
clear. Absolutely.
He got to the back multiple times. He nearly sunk in a choke. But
if he had one more minute of the round, he might have won.
Probably. But then you go on to the second round, and it starts a little bit more of the same. And this is where it gets a little nutty. And you kind of, if you are familiar with the show, kind of knew we was kind of going to get nutty, because Shanda Khan had the leg lock on Omran. And then you see in the bottom corner, they do a Dana White cam, kind of like what Bellator did with the Conor McGregor cam last Saturday. Except you actually got to hear Dana, and he's basically saying, "Oh, I mean, that's in." But I kind of agree with Dana that, it was in, but I felt like Shanda Khan could have cranked on that leg lock more than he did.
He did not pull the trigger at all, and he probably sat back and relaxed, thinking that he was going to trap the leg even more, and it just didn't happen.
No, of course, because if he does that, then we're talking about a dominant grappling performance from Shandakan en route to a submission. And we're talking about Shandakan as the star here.
Right. Either Shandakan via submission or Shandakan by potentially a unanimous decision if it goes the full 2 rounds and there is no third round, because at that point of the fight, I don't think that it would have gone to a sudden victory round had Shandakan kept doing what he had been doing the entire round leading up to that point. Yeah.
Absolutely not. You're right. And then Omran just, he manages to get out of it, which was impressive considering how deep the leg lock was.
Very impressive.
And then
also the one part that you forgot from round 1 was he was able to get out of a standing rear naked choke too.
Yeah.
So
he's got some incredible submission defense. And then Shaban, he doesn't just have incredible submission defense because he puts up he's going for a Darce choke. Not only did he go for a Darce choke and had the usual positioning with Shandakan laid out and the arms around him, he puts his legs around him too. It was like a tarantula on the neck. It was incredible.
Yeah, it's one of the nastiest Darce chokes I've ever seen. And Tom, I don't know if you've ever rolled with anyone BJJ wise, but getting caught in a Darce choke is one of the most uncomfortable submissions that I've ever felt in my life. And I got trapped in my first win by my master instructor. I tapped almost instantaneously. I'm like, this is horrible.
Well, you saw Chandakan in the post fight comments talking about he kept breathing, and all of a sudden he woke up.
When you went to sleep, yeah. That's what happened.
It was kind of disturbing a little bit watching him go to sleep the way that he did.
Yeah, it really was. And then once you saw that Dana said that he was out, the referee quickly jumped in and stopped it. So definitely a very impressive performance for Omran. Very, very underrated. Again, and I'm just going to toot my own horn here. If you go back and watch the first episode of the show, he was someone that I was super high on. And he was also someone, if you remember my predictions, that I said could make it to the semifinal. And look at where we are.
Well,
so
he did. We just got to see who his opponent's going to be. But first, obvious, as we talked about, 4 down, 4 to go. So now we got to flip back over to the featherweights next week. Interesting matchup next week. We got Bekzigad Usmanov from Team Grasso taking on Zigmanis Ramaska from Team Shevchenko. And I mean, Zain, this does not look good for Team Shevchenko. I mean, obviously, Rody Roots is phenomenal, but he's their sole win. They haven't won since the first week.
No, they have not. I'm actually taking Ramaska here to get it done. I think it's going to be an absolute slugfest, and based on the reaction to the highlights, there's going to be some sort of finish. I don't know if it's going to be a knockout or a submission, but something.
If the editing of the preview holds up to what the episode is actually going to be like, including that Dana White reaction at the end, this could be incredible.
Yeah, this could be an incredible fight, and even though these two guys are very even though these two guys are super solid, hang on just a second. Even though these two guys are super solid, let's see. Just going over to his mom first. I mean, this is probably going to be one of the most entertaining fights of the season to this point. Just considering that this past fight that we just went over was great too. But looking at Ramaska, he's 9-2. He's finished all 9 of his wins, which is very impressive. You rarely see that these days. He won a 4-man tournament in a regional promotion. That was back in February of last year, and then his most recent fight was in May of 2023. Blade fights too. So he's got a little bit of an experience in himself. Looking at his opponent, Usmanov, he's 11-4. He's at a Jackson Wink, so obviously you got to rep those guys, considering that Jackson Wink MMA is one of the best camps in the whole the whole sport, and has been for a long time. And of course, you're looking at someone who's a nasty striker. He has Sambo, Muay Thai, and boxing experience. So something tells me, given that small little brief breakdown, that someone is getting viciously finished in this fight. What do you think? Yeah,
I think somebody's going to get viciously finished, especially when you've got somebody who is a finisher himself, like Ramaska, who I'm not sure. I don't remember his loss if that ended before the bell. But my point being that Ramaska takes care of business before the bell. I know Usmanov, we talked about, has the 11 wins and is a Jackson Wink product, but I mean, if you're Team Shevchenko, you're really looking for a win now. And Ramaska, could Ramaska present one more?
By the way, his last loss, which was in October of 2021, to someone who I've never even heard of, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce, was via unanimous decision. So to answer your question, he has made the final bell before in the past. It's just been a couple of years. So
okay, so he's made the final bell, but it just didn't go his way. But he is a complete finisher, and as I was going to say, I mean, if you're Team Shevchenko, I feel like you might need Ramaska to pull off a big finish here.
No, this is a must-win to square things even at 2 fights apiece. And with that being said, with the desperation factor, I don't know about you. I'm still picking Ramaska, knowing what we know now. What do you
Yeah,
think?
I'm going Ramaska. I think Ramaska gets a finish, and I think Team Shevchenko manages to get its first win and put it up to 2-3.
Oh, well, you mean it would? Oh, yeah, you're right. Because this episode made it 3-1. So yeah, you're right. It would make it 3-2 in that very case. Thank you for correcting me. Do you think? Do you think though, given how we think the fight's going to go, that if it's as exciting as we think it's going to be, could you see these two guys end up getting signed, even the loser? What do you think?
I think so. If it's an impressive enough performance, I think so. You never know when you're gonna get a call for a late notice fill-in for somebody who's injured or something.
That's exactly right, and you never know when you're going to get a DWCS call, either if they're that desperate and looking for featherweights. You never know. So
you never know. You just mentioned DWCS. We've seen it in the past.
That's exactly right. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Tough Enough of the Ultimate Fighter, Team Grasso versus Team Shevchenko Aftermath. Thank you to everyone who tuned into this episode. We do this every single week after every episode of the Ultimate Fighter. So if you've never seen this before, welcome in, and we hope you enjoyed the show. Before we get out of here, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Empty the Bench Podcast Network, youtube.com/ETB Network. And again, as we alluded to at the beginning of the episode, we are slowly but surely approaching 1,000 subscribers. And of course, we just want to remind you once again that Tough Enough, as is every single show across this network, is presented by Playback. And also, just as a final reminder, you can catch every single episode of this very show. It comes out on Tuesday nights with us following right after around 11 Eastern. So be sure to not miss every single episode of the show. And then one more reminder is that the Ultimate Fighter finale is more than likely going to be taking place at the end of August. So stay tuned for more details there. Tom, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we are good. So for Zain, I'm Tom. We'll see you next week for another edition of Tough Enough. Take care, everyone.
Take care. Have a good one.